On today's show, the Hawks were shorthanded at home on Wednesday, and the results followed. Atlanta fell flat in what became a lopsided loss to the Clippers without Jalen Johnson and others. We'll get into all of what transpired and more coming up.
You are Locked On Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 2117 of the Locked On Hawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. I am your host, Brad Rowland, coming to you on a Wednesday evening into Thursday. And today's podcast is brought to you by the folks at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. And today, we'll be focusing on what became a lopsided home loss for the Hawks, 115-92 at the hands of the Clippers. A disappointing game for the Hawks, but also one that was let's just say underwhelming for a number of different reasons. Not the most entertaining game, I would say, big picture. But Atlanta's now lost back-to-back games after a little bit of an uptick before that. The big story, quite honestly, in this game was that the Hawks were without Jalen Johnson, and that was a surprise late in the day on Wednesday. LA was also in a weird spot. They were the bigger national story coming into the game. A very dramatic Tuesday for the Clippers, where they had a travel situation and then also an utterly bizarre situation with Chris Paul, which they moved on from Chris Paul in the middle of the night in Atlanta. All that said, this game was kind of a coin flip coming in the betting market, according to our friends at FanDuel. But the reason for that, the Hawks were favored for most of the day and honestly were sizable favorites at one point. But then Jalen Johnson was a late scratch with right calf tightness. And that's, again, a big theme. So if you're new to the podcast, I'll break down the game in depth. But this kind of casts a shadow over the game. So I'm going to begin right here. Jalen was not on the injury report at all for the Hawks after the game on Monday, the back-to-back in Philadelphia and Detroit. But he popped up on the injury report as questionable after warming up on Wednesday, about an hour before tip-off, and then went from questionable to out pretty quickly before tip-off on Wednesday. Of note, and some people actually noticed this on the film, and I had a note on my own notes from Monday, he was actually having that right leg worked on and wrapped up during the game on Monday in Detroit, in the third quarter, at least, if not earlier than that. Obviously, he played a lot of minutes and played well. Had a huge second half, for example, after a slow first half, but there were no signs of Jalen missing this game. Pre-game, he was asked, Quinn Snyder was actually asked about Jalen, gave a very normal answer, not an injury report at all, et cetera, et cetera. But what I would say is, if there was any doubt whatsoever, and I mean any doubt whatsoever about whether Jalen should have played in this game, I think there's every reason to be careful with him. He played 83 minutes in the 2 days on Sunday and Monday because of the double overtime game and then a close game on Monday. So even more reason to play it safe with him. We don't know anything else right now beyond what we know. He just missed this game. Muscle injuries can be tricky. It's still, again, listed as calf tightness, not a strain right now, any of that stuff. But given that he is a massive centerpiece for this Hawks team, I am okay with him not pushing through on a muscle injury. There's been all kinds of muscle injury issues across the league this year. But without him, and of course, without Trae Young and Porzingis at the same time, the Hawks were without their three, at least coming into the season, their three projected top scorers. Obviously, Nickeil Alexander-Walker has been up there this season, but certainly their top two offensive players in Jalen and Trae. And then wherever you want to slot in Porzingis, whether it's behind Nickeil or whatever, behind Okongwu, certainly top five offensive player on the team, Porzingis. And the Hawks, frankly, looked like a team that was both tired and undermanned in this game. Only had 10 guys available to the Hawks because of all the injuries. And one of the 10, by the way, was Caleb Houston, who started the game this morning in College Park. So the Skyhawks had a game at 11 a.m. Eastern time, the G League team for the Hawks. He played 30-plus minutes in that game and then came back and played tonight. Granted, in garbage time only, he was the 10th guy. He became the first player in Hawks history to play in an NBA game and G League game in the same day. So they were very short-handed, let's just say, in this one. And that's important to note. Now, it also does not excuse what was a not great performance. My overarching takeaway from this game is that I am not terribly worried about it. I normally do not react that way anyway. But, like, for instance, last week against the Wizards, the Hawks were terrible. And that was only one out of 82, but that was a much more annoying and I would say bothersome result and performance from the Hawks. This game, they didn't play well. This is a very winnable game that they could have certainly won even with shorthanded roster, but it was not quite as bothersome because of just what happened. The Hawks could not score effectively or efficiently, and that's not terribly shocking given the available roster. So they scored less than a point per possession in the game overall. That's just putrid against a bad defensive team so far this year in LA. Now, it's interesting because the Clippers have been really bad this season, but coming into the year, I think people were projecting them as a top 10 defense, and they've been bottom 5 in that category. I'm not sure which one of those is real, but they were better in this game. The Hawks scored 21 points or fewer in 3 out of the 4 quarters in this game. They also had an 81 offensive rating in the half court. So when they were not able to run, that's been a theme recently, but especially without Jalen as another creator, in addition to Trey and Porzingis, they weren't able to score. They did nothing well, basically, by the numbers offensively. They had their second fewest points in the paint all year. That's 40. Only the OKC game was worse, and they were facing the NBA's best defense in that game, which is more explainable. They shot 46% on twos. That's a terrible number. There was just not a lot of rim pressure happening. There was a couple of nice drives from Nikhil and Dyson. Those two guys were at least mildly productive in this game offensively, but there just was nothing else going to the rim. Okongwu looked tired in this one after playing a lot of minutes the last several games. Mo Gay's offense not exactly going to turn the world around for you anyway. So I thought it was interesting that both Quinn Snyder and Nickeil Alexander-Walker said after the game the Hawks were not spacing well enough offensively. That after a rewatch was on the film, and people think about spacing as only 3-point shooting, and that definitely matters to spacing, but there's ways to space your roster to allow for driving lanes, for example, and the Hawks have been pretty good at that this season, especially in the recent couple of weeks. That was not there today. A lot of clumped stuff, not a lot of spacing, and just kind of being in the right place at the right time, and that kind of led to some bad results. They shot okay-ish from 3, and better than the Clippers did. They were 13-39. Not a lot of volume, that's fine. But they had bad ball security in the first quarter and didn't stop with that until the game was kind of already away from them. They didn't get to the line at all in this game. They didn't get to the glass at all in this game. It was basically an equal opportunity, poor offensive game. Even Nickeil Alexander-Walker, who was the team's leading scorer with 21 points, had those points on 21 shooting possessions. So basically, he was not efficient either. He was productive, but not great. The only guy, literally the only guy who played for the Hawks who was efficient as a scorer was Luke Kennard, basically. He had 11 points on 5 shots. I mean, Asa Newell as well was fine there, but a lot of the key guys were just okay or not great. And that is going to be limiting when you're already without Trey, Jalen, and Porzingis. So somebody asked me this question during the game, and I forget who, so my apologies. I'll just want to answer it. Basically, like, hey, if the Hawks had this roster that they had available tonight, where would they be in offensive rating for the season? I would say probably bottom 5. Like, if you just simply took Trae Young, Jalen Johnson, and Kristaps Porzingis off of the Hawks and did not replace them, which is an important caveat here, that's going to be a bad offense. It just is. Like, there's not an initiator that I would say is a primary guy. Nikhil's been awesome this season and was probably their best initiator in this game. But Nikhil Dyson backcourt offensively is not special. Defensively, it's very special, but offensively, it's not. Ricochet and Mo Gay at the forward spots, not special. Okongwu, playing the way he did today, was probably below where he would normally be, but still, like, this is not an offensive roster that I would say is particularly effective. They still were below what you would expect, and they looked tired to me, but it wasn't offensive. That's a funny word to use in the offensive context, but, they just didn't play well, didn't make shots, and they'd be better than this, but it was not shocking to me that they struggled offensively given what they were doing. They didn't have the time to prepare without Jalen. Sometimes if you know a guy's going to be out, like this has happened with Trey in the past as well. But they basically had, 45 minutes notice on Jalen? That's going to be tough to overcome, especially when you're already playing short-handed. So that's the offense. That was the reason why the Hawks lost, was their offense. Defensively, it wasn't too bad. They ended up having about a 120 defensive rating. That's not good. It was a little bit loose in the second half, I will say. The one thing that they did not do well enough was protect the paint in this game. 6% on twos for the Clippers. And the Hawks gave up way too many free line drives. Especially when the backups were in the game. The defensive glass was a problem. Once again, they gave up 25 second chance points. That's been a problem all year long. I asked about it pregame. Quinn gave a pretty reasonable answer. They know it's a problem. Like, it's not like they're ignoring it, but they were also super small in this game. You take Jalen off, Jalen is their best defensive rebounder. Like, just full stop, best guy. And taking him away makes things more difficult. Unlike previous games as well, when they were able to kind of boost things up by creating havoc defensively, they only had 12 turnovers created. That's not enough either. So they were not great defensively. It was more of the mediocre variety than the bad variety, but it was really the offense. And look, just to say this one more time plainly, it was overall not a good performance. I'm not washing that away. The word excuse gets thrown around. I don't make excuses. I give you my analysis. I'm not on the team. I'm not, it's not, I have no reason to give you excuses. They looked tired to me. That is understandable given that the situation with all the travel they've been doing and the roster they have. They still shouldn't lose by 23 points to the Clippers at home. So both can be true at the same time. This is not a result that I am terribly worried about, given the personnel. I think that the Hawks coming into the game, honestly, as soon as Jalen was ruled out, I thought in my head they were in some trouble. But it was one of those nights where like everything kind of spiraled on itself. And I'm not crashing out about that. I don't think you should be either. I get frustration, and there were some people that were melting down in the comments. I understand. I get why. The Clippers have been bad this season. I think they were better than the record for sure. And the Hawks were shorthanded. It does make me laugh a little bit that people just like are glossing over that the Hawks were literally without 3 of their top 5 players in this game. Like, it is what it is, but it's more of a blip for me. The big thing is, honestly, and this is unfortunate as the big story, is Jalen's injury. If Jalen is out for 2 weeks, that becomes more of a problem. If Jalen's back on Friday or Saturday, you don't really worry about it. You shrug it off. It's one game. It is what it is. It wasn't like losing the Wizards. That was much more of a crash out game. And even then, it's one of 82 for me. But it was not a fun game to watch. The Hawks were pretty putrid on offense. And it happens sometimes. It's one you want to probably throw the tape away for the most part. But we'll get into how this game unfolded more in a second when it comes to player-by-player evaluations, my more granular analysis of the lineups, of moments, and all that stuff is coming up in just one moment. What if sports were traded like markets? Now you can put your sports IQ to work in real time with Robinhood prediction markets. It's not you against the house. It's you participating in a live market. You can buy or sell your positions live all game long. Use your sports knowledge in the moments that matter. Robinhood prediction markets changes the game. It's people moving the action. So when momentum shifts, you can move with it. I always knew the game, but I never knew the dynamic way to apply that knowledge. Now I can actually take part live in a market powered by people. You're no longer just a spectator. Play by play, you decide. Trade every play with Robinhood. Now available across the U.S. Download the Robinhood app now to begin. All right, I want to encourage you now to make Locked On Hawks your first listen each and every day. Check out the show, subscribe anywhere you find your podcast, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, etc. Leave ratings, reviews, comments. I appreciate all the support. Please tell your friends about the show as well, and we'll dive right in now to how this game unfolded. Unfortunately, it was basically early and often things not going well for the Hawks. They had one lead in the game. It was by 2 points. They were down 14-4 at the outset. The Hawks did score first. It was 2-0. And then LA scored the next 9 points. The Hawks had some turnovers early on. They missed 4 of their first 6 shots. Mo Gay had a pretty hilariously bad miss for one of his 2 shots in the entire game offensively. There was a nice, actually, a fake and by Ricochet and a nice drive for a dunk. But other than that, it was kind of mixed offensively early on and for the most part the entire game other than the third quarter. They had Dyson defend Kawhi and Nikhil on Harden. That largely worked, actually, as much as the Hawks, struggled in this game. They held Harden and Leonard to a combined 48 points on a combined 48 shooting possessions. So, that's all day you take that. That's actually really good, and that's a credit to Nikhil and Dyson for the most part. But everything else on the margins did not go their way to level things out. I mentioned before in passing that Porzingis was out again in this game, which we knew yesterday. And by the way, if you did not listen to the show already, I had a 2-part episode with my friend Tyler Jones. Tyler's always entertaining. People either love Tyler or hate Tyler or whatever. It's always fun to talk to Tyler. It's a fun conversation. He also watches every single Hawks game, dialed in, fun guest always. But Porzingis was out for the 4th straight time with illness. And I reported this earlier today. He was at shoot-around. He also was on the Hawks bench during the game. So he's not contagious or anything like that. So obviously it's not a flu or COVID or whatever. He has some kind of other issue. I asked Quinn Snyder pregame about whether there's an update or progress about Porzingis at this point. And Quinn's entire answer was, and I quote, "All I can say is that he's making progress," end quote. So that's a frustrating answer, although it was kind of expected when I asked the question. In my mind, just taking behind the curtain a little bit, normally illness and personal reasons, you don't really ask a lot about those. It's just kind of like standard procedure. But when a guy's out for the 4th straight game and ruled out a day before, it became like, okay, I have to ask about this. And I did. Obviously, there's the history of Porzingis as well with the POTS diagnosis that he shared with Fred Katz over the summer. It was mentioned to me by someone who knows things that there could be some privacy concerns as well. I've said this a few times already, but the Hawks are not required to say anything else other than he's out with illness. But he was on the bench. I did ask the question. That was the answer. The next thing that we'll find out about Porzingis is the next injury report for the Hawks, which is due on Thursday night for the game on Friday. We'll see. I think that if I'm doing the deductive reasoning, I'm not reporting this, it stands to reason that if he was not contagious, it points to potentially a flare-up of some kind with his previous syndrome, that POTS syndrome. But we may never know the details. It's not an injury. If he had a knee injury, we could ask over and over again. The Hawks eventually have to say something about it. That's part of the NBA reporting process. With an illness, there's no requirement of that. So we'll see. Quinn gave the answer he gave. I asked the question. There you go. But he was out in this game, obviously, in addition to Trey and Jalen being out. They actually played, because of that, they were shorthanded in the front court very clearly. And rotationally, they had to play Ricochet at the 4 a couple times, which he hasn't really done at all. Last year, he did a little bit more. But with the emergence of Mo Gay, they haven't had to do that really much at all this season. But because they only had Kongwu, Gay, and Asa Newell as even potential 4s and 5s, they had to play Zach a little bit at the 4, which was fine. It didn't kill them, but they went a little bit smaller in that group. It was pretty gross early on for the Hawks, which we didn't know at the time was going to be a theme the entire way. But they had 8 turnovers in the first quarter. There was basically no functional offense for the Clippers either. They got off to a slow start. The Hawks had their one biggest run of the game later in the first half, a 15-5 run from the end of the first quarter to the beginning of the second quarter. Kennard hit a couple threes in that stretch. Zach hit a 3 as well. Dyson had a nice drive for a 3-point play. But as soon as that happened, they didn't score again for about 3.5 minutes. They were back down by 7 again. They got it back to 2 very, very briefly in the middle of the second quarter. And then the rest of the first half, 15-3 run by the Clippers to end the first half. And basically, now that we know this is over, that basically ended the game. It didn't end the game, but the Hawks never recovered from that late run in the first half. Atlanta scored 3 points in about 4.5 minutes. The Hawks had 20 points in the second quarter, which is already bad enough, but 6 of them were in the first 90 seconds. So they scored 14 points in the last 10.5 minutes of the first half, basically. And that was telling. They had 41 points on 49 possessions offensively. The math on that is pretty grisly. They only had, as I mentioned before, only one good offensive quarter in the game. It was the third quarter. They did score pretty well in that period. They made some shots. They scored 4 possessions in a row. That was a nice finish by Dyson. In the middle of that, they had a 3 from Kennard, who was really good in this game. They did shoot 57% from the floor in the third quarter, 32 points, but they kept, as soon as they actually did score some, the defense kind of gave out at the same time. The Clippers had 6% shooting, 10 assists, and 39 points in that third quarter. And part of that was that Quinn, I think, trying to look for some offense to juice things up, played a lot of Luke Kennard and a lot of Asa Newell in the third quarter. And that definitely did help the offense. They leaned into more shooting lineups, more skill lineups. I understood why. After watching the first half, it was not hard to see what was going on, but that did really hurt their defense. That's part of the trade-off. And where you have the shorthanded roster is that, yeah, logically speaking, if you're suddenly playing a lot of lineups that have, 3 or 4 guys who I think are pretty shaky defenders, and that combination, by the way, basically, Kennard, Krejci, Newell in particular, those 3 guys are all below average defenders at this point in time. Maybe Asa won't be in the future, but right now he's a rookie who makes mistakes and all that stuff. So it just the offense, it just hurt the defense, and that was the end of that. So they're down by 21 points in the third quarter. It felt like it was over. It wasn't for sure, but it was pretty soon after that. When you're down by 21, you got to score quickly in the fourth to make things interesting, and that just did not happen. They were down by 25 pretty quickly. The margin was never less than 20 other than one possession. Caleb Houston came in garbage time, hit a 3 with 4 minutes to go to make it 19. But they lost this game by 23 points, and it basically felt like it was going that direction the entire time. So as far as taking a half step back before I talk about the individual player stuff, the bench units had the best plus minuses. Kennard was +8 in a 23-point loss. That's kind of funny. That's some variance, I would say. They did make shots on the bench unit, but I say that it wasn't always the bench. Beat Krejci was -25. So it was really one group that was making shots. And if you look at the numbers, by the way, the guys who made shots, Luke Kennard, Asa Newell, Keaton Wallace, those guys combined to shoot 7 of 12 from three. It's hard to get blasted when you shoot that well from three. And because they did, they were able to hold up. It was that they could not find two-way groups. The starters in this game couldn't score. The bench couldn't get stops. And that leads you to a pretty rough result. So, again, one to kind of wash away, but that was the game flow. In a second, I will talk about the player-by-player evaluations, a little bit of a look ahead to the next game on the agenda, which is an interesting one on Friday, and much more in just one moment. The World Cup is coming back to North America for the first time since 1994, and with 48 teams for the first time ever, it's going to be absolutely massive. Let's be honest, though, ticket buying is actually the hardest part sometimes, and that's why the Game Time app is coming in clutch for you with finally giving the fans real advantages when it comes to snagging seats. With Game Time, you can track price drops in real time, get alerts when great seats become available to you, and buy tickets the moment that they actually hit the app. If it's the power back in the hands of the fans, and it makes going to the World Cup realistic instead of impossible. With Game Time, you pull up the app, and it makes it really simple for you to scroll through the matchups and compare the seat views. You make a game, tap a section, actually have your tickets locked in within minutes. No confusion, no hunting for the fine print at the end. Prices, by the way, include fees up front, which I love, with no last-second surprises at checkout. Alerts from the teams as well, and matches can make it really easy to grab tickets the moment they actually become available to you instead of missing out in the end. And you can take the guesswork out of buying tickets right now for the World Cup and everything else, for every match, every concert, every event with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, download the Game Time app, make an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Swipe, tap, ticket, go with Game Time. Have your health or family needs changed lately? Georgia's got you covered. Georgia Access is our safe marketplace for Georgians to compare, apply, and enroll in health insurance plans that offer the best value for their individual needs. Open enrollment is happening now. Visit georgiaaccess.gov today. That's georgiaaccess.gov. Georgia Access, health insurance for Georgia by Georgia. All right, so the player-by-player evaluations in this game, and all 10 guys who were available ended up getting into the game. Caleb Houston did briefly almost check in the first half when Beat Krejci kind of came up limping a little bit. He sat down after going to the scores table, but then came in for the final 5 minutes of the game. Again, as a reminder, the first time a player in Hawks history has ever played in the G League and the NBA in the same game. That's just weird, but it's also out of necessity. They could have had Eli Njai do the same thing. By the way, it would have been nice to have N'Faly Dante available in this game, but Dante just missed 2.5 weeks with a knee injury. He came back Tuesday in the G League and got hurt. Concussion for N'Faly. So he might have played a real role tonight if he was available, but he wasn't. And that is why the bench was as short as it was. But Houston came in, made a three. By the way, he dunked in the G League game. Caleb Houston is famously I think the only guy with a certain pedigree or minutes played or whatever that has not dunked in the NBA of his size. But he dunked in the G League, almost there, just not quite all the way there. Asa Newell had one of the better games for the Hawks in this game. 11 points on 6 shots for Asa. Hit 2 threes, had a rebound, had a steal, did turn it over twice. There was moments where you could see Quinn coaching Asa hard. I asked Quinn post-game about Asa, and he said all the right things, talking about how he's playing the way they want him to play, taking the shots they want him to take, giving good energy, and I agree with all of that. I think Asa has been impressive. By first-round pick standards, he's not gotten a lot of attention for obvious reasons. The Hawks have a lot going on. He isn't playing very much. They're winning for the most part, more than they're losing. You have the other kind of subplots of Jalen's breakout, Nikhil's breakout, the Pelicans pick, all that stuff. But Asa, for a pick in the 20s as a one and done, looks good to me. He's making shots. The form looks good from three-point range. The motor looks good. Defensively, he's got a long way to go, but that's very normal for a 19-year-old rookie big. So I've been impressed with Asa. Obviously, he'll play more in the future. He looked good in the G League as well. He played great, I thought, on Tuesday with College Park. So nice steps forward and good vibes. He was probably the best vibes guy of the whole night across the board for the Hawks. Keaton Wallace, 8 points on 9 shots, 4 assists, 2 rebounds, and a steal. I thought Keaton was fine. I was probably a little bit overeager a few times, but that was actually probably needed in this game. Only 1 of 4 on 2s. His finishing's been a little bit shaky, but he did make 2 threes. I thought he played fine. He gave him good minutes, and they used him, I thought, appropriately in this one. Beat Krejci, 5 points on 7 shots, 1 6 from 3, 3 rebounds. A game worse, minus 25 for V. I'm not sure if that was his fault or not. He came up limping a little bit in the first half. I hope that's not a huge concern. He stayed in the game eventually, but not his best work. 3 turnovers, kind of was just a little bit, it's kind of he kind of gets blown through defensively sometimes, which is normal, but I thought he was not his best in this one. Luke Kennard was really good after 2 games over the weekend where he did leave one of them with illness. So I think it was pretty common knowledge that he was not feeling well over the weekend on the 2 games, but he looked good to me back here, like looked healthier, hit 3 threes, had 5 rebounds, 2 assists, 1 turnover, plus 8. Good to see him play well in this spot. Elsewhere, Mo Gay did not score, over 2 from the floor, 6 rebounds, 5 fouls, and a steal. Mo has had better nights for sure. Offensively, this is kind of the reversion to the old Mo Gay experience where it was kind of rough. Defensively, it was fine, honestly. And his fine is usually quite good. He made one play that was actually kind of an eye popper in a good way, but a mixed bag game. And I think offensively just didn't really have anything that he was like comfortable going to in this game. Risha Shea, 11 points, 11 shots, 3 rebounds, 3 assists. I thought Zach was okay. A little bit aggressive at times in a good way. I thought he should have gone to the rim a few times more than he did. He had one nice drive that I wanted to, that's kind of in my head right now. But 4 3-point attempts, only made one of them. I thought he was okay. He wasn't great. Most guys weren't great in this game, and he was not either. Okongwu really struggled. I think he's been awesome this year, like full stop, really, really good. Tonight, not his best work. I think it was actually his worst shooting game of the season, if I'm doing the numbers right in my head. No, he had one more. I think the second Toronto game, he was 2 for 12 from the field. Other than that, he was 3 for 12 in this game, 1 of 6 from 3. Did have 9 rebounds, 5 assists, like still did some stuff well, just had some weird finishing faux pas. Like he had one that was like a 3-foot miss at the rim, like a Capella style miss. So I said to Kevin Chouinard next to me during the game, he'll have better nights. I'm sure he's gassed right now, playing a ton of minutes with everybody out in the way that Porzingis has been out, etc. The backcourt was totally fine in this game. Dyson had 15 points on 13 shots, 3 rebounds, 2 assists, 2 steals. Had some rough turnovers in the first quarter, but other than that, he settled in pretty nicely. Had a couple nice floaters. He was aggressive enough offensively to kind of make things happen. I think he defended Kawhi pretty darn well. Held him to 21 points on 24 shots. Like that's good against Kawhi. So he was fine. And then Nikhil, 21 points to basically go right at his average. It's still crazy to me he's averaging that many points, but he is. But a not great efficiency game for Nikhil. 2-7 from 3, 5-11 from 2. He still played well. He had one crazy, like impressive left-handed finish. The drives have been popping all year long from Nikhil, but 5 rebounds, 3 assists. Like he was just okay. Did a good job defensively on Harden, but and gave I thought appropriate context post game to some of the issues the Hawks had. He talked about rebounding a lot as a problem, and it was in this game. But I think that no one particularly was awesome, other than maybe you could say Kennard and Newell were on the good side. Everybody else was either like meh or kind of actively shaky for their normal selves, which makes sense when you lose by 23 points in your home building. So for the first time in quite literally 4 weeks, the Hawks have a second consecutive home game, which means they don't have to travel after tonight's game. Crazy stuff. The Hawks have already had 5 back-to-backs. I was talking about this with somebody during the game, actually before the game. The Rockets, for example, did not play a single back-to-back this year until this week. Sunday and Monday, they had a back-to-back. The Hawks have 5 already. Travel schedules are what they are. By winning percentage, the Hawks' schedule so far has not been hard. But by, logistically, it's not been easy. So it's one of those, like, which one do you care about more? Well, I'll leave that to you to decide. But they do get to stay home and play the Nuggets on Friday. Because I did the two-part episode yesterday, I will, barring big news, not have a show until the game on Friday. So I'll do a little bit of a preview here. The Nuggets are coming to town for their one and only visit. That means the one time that Jokic is in town all year long. They won tonight on the road in Indiana behind Jamal Murray with 52. That's 52 points for Murray tonight. He was incredible in Indiana. But they are not their full selves either. Now, they do have, at least as of today, they have Jokic and Murray, their 2 best players, but they don't have Aaron Gordon. They don't have Christian Brown. We'll see what they look like. If they have Jokic, then they're obviously dangerous. They're a really good team. And as long as Nikola is playing, it's a tough matchup. The big thing is, big things are, does Jalen play? Does Porzingis play? I don't know the answer to those. Trey, we already know, is out for this game. But after that, they go to Washington on Saturday on a back-to-back, and Washington is not a good team. But as a reminder, 8 days ago, they beat the Hawks by a lot. So nothing's easy there whatsoever. It would be good to bounce back in some form on Friday against Denver and I will tell you how I feel about that game more when I know if Jalen and or Porzingis will be playing. If this same roster's from tonight and they're playing Denver, they're probably in some trouble. Not that it's not winnable, but they'll be underdogs, and they should be if they don't have Jalen and Porzingis on Friday. But we'll see. So stay tuned for that. I'll have a podcast, as I always do, after the game on Friday. Again, in the meantime, if there's something that happens between now and then, I will break in and do an emergency episode if necessary. I always will when that happens. But in the meantime, I've been busy on the show. There'll be 6 episodes this week. And please watch that 2-parter with Tower Jones from Tuesday evening into Wednesday. I appreciate everybody being here. As always, please subscribe to Locked On Hawks each and every day. I definitely would appreciate you joining me. Apple, Spotify, YouTube, etc. If you want to follow the show on X/Twitter, it's at Locked On Hawks. I am there at BT Rowland. I'm also on Blue Sky at BT Rowland. You can follow my non-podcast coverage of the Hawks at patreon.com/BT Rowland. All right, everybody, enjoy your Wednesday evening into Thursday. We'll see you all next time.